This session is entitled Get Everyone to Innovate, sponsored by O-Power. We have two great guys from O-Power here. So, hand it over to you guys.
Thanks. All right, so yeah, this session is called Getting Everyone to Innovate. What I wanted to do very quickly was just introduce the two folks who are standing up here. My name is Ben Foster. There we go.
I'm Yoni Ben-Meshulam. I'm a data scientist at O-Power.
All right.
And before we get into sort of what we do and why we're here talking to you about innovation, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about O-Power, beginning with a study. So this study was conducted by Dr. Robert Cialdini, a professor of psychology at Arizona State University in 2007. He took a bunch of homes, a sample of homes, and tried to get them to turn off their AC and turn on their fan to use a little bit less energy. And he did that using these door hangers, and each door hanger had a different message, and he tried to see which message got people to use less energy. One of the messages was based on money. You know, if you turn on your fan, you will save energy, you will have a lower electric bill. Another message related to the environment, he said, you'll be green, we want a sustainable world. And the third message was citizenship. It turns out at the time in California where he was doing the study, there were rolling brownouts. So if you use less energy, we can reduce the number of brownouts. So just a quick show of hands here. Who thinks the money message got people to use less energy? Okay, a bunch of folks. What about the environmental message? Be green. A little bit less. And what about the citizenship message? A bunch more. So of all these messages, none of them had any impact on consumption whatsoever. And in fact, I lied. There was a fourth message. That fourth message showed people a normative comparison to their neighbors. It basically said, do this because your neighbors are doing it. And just this message had a 6% impact on consumption. So this idea that just the way that you understand human psychology and human behavior can allow you to impact something like this so easily, just a door hanger, is really phenomenal. And this is why we started the company O-Power. That our co-founders read this paper, thought this was a really cool idea. We took this to the next level. You know, we reimagined the electric bill, creating a home energy report that has that kind of messaging on it, compares you to people similar to you, shows you other things that can nudge you in the right direction. My job at O-Power when I came in was a software engineer. We developed a web platform for people to go look at their energy and to see these normative comparisons, but also do things like commit to using less and other little nudges that they can do. And we have a variety of channels, including, you know, Facebook Compare, et cetera, that are really like best in breed for energy. So that's kind of where we're coming to the idea of innovation from. And we start with the human. We start by thinking about how people behave and how you can impact their behavior in really effective ways. So for my job as a data scientist at O-Power, you know, I in the nuts and bolts of the data, and I'm trying to get new insights. But I rely upon, you know, everyone at O-Power to help me do that. So I like to think about how we as an organization are making it easy for people to innovate and making those ideas really come out into our products and our culture.
So I thought that we could actually start by kind of talking about, you know, why do we have this presentation? And why is it the fact that I'm up here talking about this and that Yoni is up here talking about this? It's a little bit more about our roles. So for me, I'm the VP of Product and User Experience for O-Power, which basically means that it's my job to innovate. That's kind of like what we do. And I think in any sort of technology company, that's kind of the job of anybody who's in product management, is to build new things, to utilize technology, to go solve new problems that haven't previously been able to be solved before. And so that's why innovation is sort of near and dear to my heart. There's a number of things that are out there that are related to innovation, like patents, et cetera. You know, we'll talk a little bit about that kind of stuff. But the whole idea here and the whole way that I'm thinking about innovation is I'm coming at this more from sort of like the manager perspective, which is, you know, I've got these big goals for next year about all these new ideas that I need to go create. You know, when you want to go issue a bunch of patents behind those ideas even. But if you have a goal which is to go create a bunch of new things, and you haven't created them yet, and you don't know what that is, then you have to take a little bit more of an abstract approach to kind of think about what is innovation, and how do you actually drive innovation forward. So to kind of kick that off and kind of think about this a little bit, here's a slide. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. Who uses agile development in your business? Agile, waterfall, maybe. There's always a whole variety of different approaches that are related to either software development. There might be toolkits, for things like, or software systems that are available for HR, et cetera. What you're doing is you're basically taking this thing that seems like it's somewhat nebulous and really hard to kind of like build a process around, but then there's these processes. There are methodologies. There are tools that are around how do you go about developing software, right? Or how do you go, solve HR issues, et cetera. All those things exist, but I think that if you look at innovation, people tend to think of it as very much a black box. It's like, how do you go about doing this? What are the methodologies behind innovation? And that's kind of like, in a lot of ways, what we wanted to talk to you about today is give you guys specific practical tips for what you can do to drive more innovation within your company. So what I wanted to kind of provide here was that set. So to start this off, I think we need to talk about how innovation actually works. What are the kind of mechanics behind innovation? What actually drives a lot of the key kind of inventions that we've seen previously? And I'll start with a little bit of a history on this. So here are two very smart people. We've got Archimedes on the left. You've got Sir Isaac Newton on the right. Archimedes discovered when he stepped into his bathtub that water displacement would work. It was a great way to measure volume, et cetera. He actually jumped out of his bathtub screaming Eureka through the streets. Hopefully, I'm not trying to convince people to do that. And then Isaac Newton, the story always goes that he got hit by an apple while he's sitting under an apple tree and sort of discovered the theory of gravity. I don't know whether those stories are actually true, but the point here is that innovation is very different than discovery. And we're not talking about how to make people smarter or how to get you to like suddenly start waking up at 3 a.m. with some amazing epiphany about the next kind of product that you can go build, right? Innovation has a little bit more behind that. And so to talk about that a little bit better, we've got a famous quote by obviously, everybody knows who this is Albert Einstein had said, "Necessity is the mother of all invention." And I think that that's true, but I think that it's only half true. And in a lot of ways, that quote is sort of in reference to the building of the atomic bomb, which obviously was sort of necessary at that time, or at least some people thought it was necessary at that time. But it's been necessary for a long time. There are plenty of civilizations who really had a need for a big weapon, and yet it still wasn't invented. Why is that the case? Why was that not sort of like invented earlier? And I think the reason is because they lacked the knowledge, they lacked the understanding, they lacked the technology, and fundamentally they lacked the capability. And so I would actually posit that if necessity is the mother of all invention, then capability is the father of all invention. And so what that means to us, if we kind of like, play that out here, is about how do we pull different ideas together? How do we take a capability on the one end and take, a need on the other end and fuse those two things together to create something new? That's what, in a lot of ways, innovation is about. So the first example, we already talked about this, right? You've got nuclear physics research combined with a military need, and that yields this, right? You can take adhesive tape and apply it to a medical need, and you end up with a Band-Aid. You can take the telegraph, which combines basically the advent of wired electricity along with a communications need. And at O-Power, what we're trying to do is we're trying to apply our understanding of behavioral psychology and big data analytics and try to address an environmental need. So that's how these things fit together. And to make that work, really a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is this human element, which is if you've got all these different ideas in different people's heads within an organization, or maybe even outside of an organization, how do you pull those together? How do you pull people together so that they're sharing those ideas? Because if one person's aware of a capability, which I think very often happens, especially with like software engineers or data analysis, they're familiar with the data, they're familiar with the algorithms, they're familiar with the code, but they're not necessarily familiar with the business problems that are looking to be solved. And then on the other hand, you've got plenty of people who are very familiar with the business problems, whether they're in marketing or they're in product management, et cetera, but they don't really have a very clear understanding of what we could do to try to solve the problems that are out there. So in a lot of ways, what we're going to be talking about is that set of tips and that kind of set of recommendations that I think can be applied to try to get people to come together better and to get them to share those ideas and to be sort of open with those ideas and explore what can be created, what can be invented.
So I think what we're going to talk about is a little bit less philosophizing about, what innovation is and a little bit more about how to create the opportunities that Ben's talking about creating that bring the capabilities together with the needs. And we're going to talk a lot about how just we do that at OPower, how our physical spaces do that, and how we think about and try to encourage and empower our employees to do that. And we're going to talk about a lot of really practical things. So, we're going to have 5 sort of practical approaches and then a kind of a little side approach. And I'm a big believer in sort of bottoms-up innovation and sort of bottoms-up organization, not a big fan of departments, et cetera. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can bring that now and then to your organization. So the first thing that's really important and that we found has really helped us to innovate is just bringing a raw diversity of people to our workplace. We strive to make OPower a very heterogeneous place. People who work here have come from all of these sorts of companies. They don't look like our clients, these energy utilities. They don't look like our customers. They don't look like our field of marketing and analytics. They look like a lot of different backgrounds. And we try and bring people from all these different backgrounds to OPower. And once they get to OPower, we try and give them the ability to pursue their passions within the company. So like I said, not a big believer in departments, not a big believer in containing people. We try and get people to come together around their passions, regardless of what their title is and what their role is, and encouraging them, if it's funding events for them or if it's, just supporting and promoting their groups within the company, we do that. We also support a diverse set of offices. We now have 3 offices, and we allow each office to sort of have its own flavor. We're not trying to, be a global company yet. I mean, we're 270 people. It's pretty small, but we already have 3 offices. But we're not trying to control them. We're trying to allow them to realize, what's the right flavor of an OPower office that they need to be. So, number 1, diversity.
So that's number 1. Number 2 is establishing meaningful company values. Now, real quick show of hands. Who has at their company some values that have been described? How many of those are completely lame and useless? Not too many hands actually went down. I think that's pretty typical. Here's an example, just kind of posted on the wall at our office of some of the values that we have. And the point is not so much to kind of go through these one by one, but to just kind of like make a point, which is that the values themselves need to be very actionable. They need to be things that you can measure people on. They need to be things that you can assure are actually driving towards what you want. And if innovation is something that you're looking to have, then the question is what kind of values will actually drive towards that innovation. So the company has a role to play in this, which is facilitation and providing the means by which people can kind of like communicate and get together. But then the people themselves, the employees, also have their own set of values, which is the way in which they're supposed to operate to become more innovative and to get more out of their coworkers as well. And so those are the kinds of things that we've sort of aimed to come up with. And what's great about the list of things that we sort of see here is that we can actually put teeth behind this, right? So what we do is we reward employees for actually hitting the values because we can see who's actually doing a good job of this. And this isn't coming from some top-down approach. This is coming from sort of like this awards value system, this kind of like values kind of like system that we have, where at every quarterly company meeting, people have had a chance to basically promote their colleagues and say, this person has done a really good job with this particular value. Here's a story behind it, and we want to share that with everybody else. So people are actually getting rewards behind this. Promotions are sometimes based on this. We will evaluate candidates based on this, and I can tell you there's multiple cases where we've turned down people who would otherwise be qualified to enter the company because they're not necessarily a good match with this. And we don't think that they're actually going to contribute very heavily to getting innovation from other people because they're not necessarily matching with the values that we described. And so there's a great way to kind of put teeth behind that. Here's an example of one of those values in play. We like to try to celebrate our successes and just have fun. We've got this office gong, and we kind of celebrate every time we make a new hire, close a big deal, et cetera. So it's getting hit reasonably often, which is great.
So creating a great working environment. And these are, this is number 3. These are obvious things, right? Like we all try and do this. We all try and make a place that people want to come to, people want to congregate at. that is, allows them to come up with great ideas. But beyond, our blue couch and purple wall that we have, we try and give people the freedom to work from wherever they want. So we have a very lenient work from home policy. And this is Eric, coming into the office because it is an awesome place to work. And we try and bring people together regardless of where they are, different offices or at home. And we're insane about, video conferencing technology. We've tried, I think, like 8 different conferencing technologies. And here you see this is San Francisco on the big screen using life-size to connect to Virginia office. And then someone's driving the robot from who knows where into there. This is real. This is actually a random meeting that they walked into. But you don't need money. You don't need all this infrastructure to do this. We also, teams just use Google Hangout or Skype just to bring people together ad hoc, because it's really important to see someone's face, to see their response, to have their attention, as opposed to, your standard video conferencing or phone conferencing capabilities. It's important to bring people together who are already in the same space, instead of them just going to their desk and working heads down. If they come into the kitchen and grab a drink and there's a spot there that's so comfortable and so well lit that they're just going to sit down and have a fun conversation, that's bringing people together. That's creating that opportunity that we're talking about. Now, I don't know about you, but I get hangry, which is, for those who don't know, that's hungry and angry. And I think it's 11:15, so I'm sure a lot of you are there right now. And again, this is one of those really obvious things. Oh, you're a fun startup, like, of course you have all this food. But, we think about this as keeping people's minds engaged, and we think about this as keeping people healthy and sort of, feeding their minds quite literally. So very important to take care of people once they are at the office. So that's number 3.
All right, the fourth one that we wanted to talk about is making room for informal communication. And I think this is actually particularly important from a management standpoint, because when I worked at OPower, when I started about 3 years ago, I kind of came in with a philosophy from a management standpoint that it's really all about how do you motivate your employees to come in for 12, 13 hours a day and really just be super excited about the work that they do and get their heads down, et cetera. And in a lot of ways, it's really not actually about that, right? It's about what they actually produce. It's about the ideas that they can come up with. And so making space for these informal communications is the kind of thing that allows for ideas from one person's head and ideas from another person's head to get kind of like thrown together. This looks like a day off, but it's actually a day at work. Now, we don't do this every day, obviously. But the whole idea here was we ended up doing like a little hike. And, people were talking and they were walking and they were, discussing with different groups. And we have like all these little groups that kind of like self-form during this. And it was actually really interesting to see that a lot of different ideas came out of this. We had the marketing people and the operations people together, get the product people and the engineering people together, right? And as those sort of like dialogues happen, you sort of, hey, I haven't caught up with you in the last month. What's going on these days? What are you working on? Oh, wow, I didn't know you actually had that. That might be applicable over here, for something else that I'm working on. Those are the kinds of things that we're trying to inspire, that we're trying to pull. You can do a lot of fun things at the office, too. This is actually from Halloween. But you can make this into a game. You can make this fun. Fun at work and actually doing the work don't have to be two separate things, okay? It's not just about, like, how do you do some sort of team offsite that you're not actually doing work. Yeah, I think there's ways of pulling this together. So one of the things that we did is we encouraged different teams to kind of like, form a little group, and then they did a group Halloween costume contest. So it's fun, but it's another reason that people ended up, talking to each other. Hey, that's a great costume. Talking in the hallway. I actually just got an email recently from a conversation that actually started because of a dialogue about their costumes. It's actually real. This stuff, really does make a difference. But I don't want to give you guys a sense that we're all sort of like hippies and just kind of grow long beards and do stuff like that. The thing for us is I think there's a lot of other very direct and very sort of, business intent sort of like things that you can do as well that help to kind of create that informal communication. And I wanted to kind of give 2 examples of how we've applied that. And I think these are both very applicable within anybody else's company as well. The first one is what we call lunch and learns. And so the idea is everybody's got to eat lunch anyway, right? They're all going to kind of like take some sort of a break to do that. Instead of having them kind of eat alone at their desks, why don't you actually just kind of like have a little talk? So this might work for companies that have 10 plus people. but it's actually a really good idea. So somebody kind of just presents what they've been working on, or they present some research that they came to understand through an article that they read, et cetera. There's a whole variety of different topics that are out there, and while people are eating, they can kind of go mingle, go meet with each other, and they can learn about some new topic and figure out how that actually applies to the job that they need to go do. And then we have some sort of like Q&A and discussion afterwards as well to really get the most out of it. It's fun, people enjoy it. It doesn't actually take away from any other time within the office, but it's a great sort of thing that we try to do. The second one is related to documentation. Okay, and documentation can come in multiple forms. This doesn't have to be long technical specifications that nobody wants to read. You can make the documentation fun. You can make it digestible. You can make it make sense for a brand new employee who's going to start at the company, who knows, 3 months from now. They won't have been at that lunch and learn, but why not capture it by video, right? Why not do like a quick 5-minute editing job on it to kind of distill it down to the 10-minute version that actually makes sense and give them that kind of like information as well. So there's a lot of kind of things that you can do with documentation. And I think what we try to do at O-Power, and I would actually encourage anybody to do out there, is to treat your own internal documentation in a company like a product. Okay? You use Excel, you use Word, you use Yammer for communications. Who knows? You use all kinds of different things internally. What about treating your content and your information that way so it's easily accessible, easily digestible? And actually even maybe assign a product manager or a library science or anybody like that to go work on that content and make it so it's very accessible to people. So those are sort of like the first 4 recommendations that we had. Coming out of that, we ended up with a huge number of different ideas that kind of spawned from this. We've got people kind of overflowing with ideas in their head, so it's working really well, but the problem is, what do you do with all that? How do you actually go capture that? And that's what I wanted to turn around to Yoni to go talk about.
So, like we said at the start, Ben's the manager. Ben runs a big team. I'm a nuts and bolts worker guy, and every now and then, it's really important to just, throw out all of these, we gave you 4 really big topics, how you can run the company differently to promote innovation. But sometimes you have to throw out all of your ideas around how you're going to organize people and how you're going to optimize everything and just give them a little bit of freedom. And I've now run 5 of these innovation days at O-Power. Each one of them has one of these fun posters. There are actually 6. The first one was very impromptu. We just took a day and did stuff. And this is not a hackathon. This is not take your designers and engineers who are so fed up with the process, even with the agile process that they introduced, and so bogged down by the day-to-day, and just let them create. No, this is about everyone. This is about taking from your CEO down to, just absolutely everyone. And before we get into, I'd like to talk to you about, some of the really practical aspects that I've kind of taken out of running Innovation Day that make it work. But before that, I want to show you this 3.5-minute internal documentary that we show our employees to give them an idea about what Innovation Day is and help them kind of, gel in their minds sort of what they're planning to work on Innovation Day. It's short, so bear with us, and then afterwards I want to get into a little bit of the wiring, how to get this kind of event to work well in your company.
How many folks here for whom this is your first Innovation Day? Okay. Does anybody have a question? Erskine.
Some of the challenges.
That's a great question. There's only really only one rule here for Innovation Day, and that's that you have to be proud and show off what you did at the end of it.
Innovation Day for me is about solving a problem that you wish somebody else had solved, but it's also hopefully spending some time working on solutions to the problems that we're only beginning to dream about.
Innovation Day is just a chance to learn from people who do something other than you, have expertise in other areas, coming together on some idea where you need multiple point of views, and typically you can only have your tunnel vision of looking at what you do in your job, and it's great. It's really an enjoyable time.
I think there's 3 or 4 things that keep me awake. One is making sure that we continue to have a great culture here. It's true, actually. I'm sincerely we're getting bigger.
These tests are not adding any value. These are tests that engineers have to maintain, engineers have to look at when they fail.
So it also identifies duplicate tests, essentially.
Exactly. The way I conceptualize Innovation Day is just thinking, what would make my job easier? or make me or people I work with happier that could be done in about a day, and then go ahead and take that quick win.
I still, one of my most vivid memories is our first innovation day where, nobody really knew what the tone of this was going to be. It's not even just the projects themselves, it's the energy that the projects create cumulatively.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, dude.
So you should probably just put me falling.
The way I put it to my friends is that the people are so smart that they don't have to act smart. You don't get stuck with people who are sort of like, having to show off. It's just that people genuinely care about what they do and can ask a lot of questions and be curious.
Exactly. You could skip, like...
I'm over-designing.
No. I mean...
Maybe we want to have the flexibility
Give me
to do
3
something different
PM
every day.
Well, we
On the
have
phone.
we work with the vendor who calls people, and we don't like their user interface, so we're trying to build a better one. That's basically the gist of what
So
we're doing.
let's turn that into one click to start, and then a refresh when you want to see the results.
We often don't have enough household coverage in terms of square feet, number of bedrooms, do you have a pool, things like that. So we're trying to use Google Maps and Google Earth as a way to get that data easily and cheaply.
There's maybe potential for us as a company to branch into this kind of area of helping people make those decisions.
I would like to...
All right, everybody. We're going to get this started, and it's going to end about... I was blown away by the O-Health project. The idea was great. The research was great. Redefining in all of our minds where we can go as a company.
There is a special sauce here. There's something that's really exciting, something actually that's profound about the way that people work together to solve a problem. And as we get bigger, it's really important that we retain that excitement, that sense of purpose, the kindness. A company cannot just be very successful as a business, but be successful as a family, as a group of people. We're here for more than just a business opportunity.
So that gives you a little bit of an idea of where we're coming from with this day. But I want to talk to you about some of the challenges. And running this sort of thing, you get a lot of ideas from a lot of people about how it should work and how we should make sure that every project is followed through on, or we should make it a competition, or we should do this or that or the other. And I'm going to talk to you about how to minimize how you're adding constraints and how to maximize how you're sort of facilitating things. And it's all about facilitation to me. So most important thing is that people need the time, the space, the support, the platform to get their ideas going, to find people to collaborate with, to present. They don't need anything else. They need maybe food, all right, the brain food. So this is what my calendar looks like on Innovation Day. This is what everyone's calendar looks like on Innovation Day. Now take a moment and think about your company and your management team or yourself even. How hard is it to do this? And the more people you have, the harder this gets. And you're always going to have those few people that are like, no, it's really important. I have this big meeting that day. And then they're going to be sending emails to other people that day, and they're going to be distracting everyone from Innovation Day. So this is by far the most important and the most difficult thing to do, is to just take time away, put your title down, put your department away. This is really hard. I know it seems easy, but it's hard. The second thing is give people some kind of a digital space. I was talking to Peter Corbett earlier. I forgot what they're using, like Brainstorm or something like that. They do this once a month. And I told him, we started with a Google spreadsheet that we had, 60 people massively collaborating on, and it just became, like hundreds of ideas were thrown up there. And over time, that became a little bit more difficult to manage, and so I hacked some stuff into our internal wiki. And again, you see that it's simple. I'm not trying to add too much. I'm just trying to give people an idea of what ideas are out there, get them to contribute their idea, get that digital space going where folks can sort of put everything in one place. And if you're 3 people in an office, this can be sticky notes, right, on a whiteboard or something like that. But it's not about the digital space. It's about the human space, and it's about meeting up and talking about things and hashing them out and understanding what people's needs are and getting an internet connection. So we really, really focus on bringing people together around their ideas. We bring food, of course, and we have these things called pitch-a-thons where people just congregate, and these are office-specific, or there will be a happy hour after work on a Friday where everyone can come sort of hash out their ideas. And it's really crucial to bring this back to the human element and not try and sort of focus on where you might be coming from. If you're a technologist and you're thinking of this crazy website for innovation, bring it to people. So on the left here is Alex Lasky. He is the president and founder of OPower. He spends most of his days talking to utility CEOs, energy secretaries from various nations. He even has been invited to the White House twice now to talk with President Obama about energy. On the right is Mike Brown, at the time a fresh-faced intern at OPower. This does not happen every day that Alex sits down for 4, 5, 6 hours with an intern working on a project that they're both really passionate about. And this gets into what I was saying earlier, which is throw out the window your normal organizational hierarchy. These are really important things to have as a company, especially if you want to grow, if you want to get investors, if you want to help recruit people. You're going to need HR, you're going to need all these things, but every now and then, you just need to throw them out the window and disregard them and give people the freedom to be themselves and to bring their own skills and what they, their experiences in the world and apply them for one day, 1 or 2 days, however long you have it. And as Dan said, the only rule on Innovation Day and the most important thing is that people present. And you saw what that science fair looked like. So we have this kind of science fair style thing going on. Originally, we had everyone give a lightning talk, and that really, really sucked. It was horrible, because a lot of ideas aren't, either presentation worthy, they're more conversational, or maybe someone gained some kind of insight into something, and one size does not fit all. So we decided that even though everyone wouldn't get to hear about every idea, that a science fair is a much more relaxed, laid back, and appropriate environment for sharing what you came up with over that day. And sometimes it's just a one-person team, and sometimes it might be 8 people. Like OHealth was insane. They had business people, they had technologists, they were doing data mashups, they were doing all sorts of stuff. And so this kind of approach to presentation can really go a long way. Which leads us into the 5th point that we sort of appropriately threw out our presentation in the 1 through 5 to highlight Innovation Day. But how do you follow through on things? And that's actually like a lot of Ben's job, I think.
Yeah, or at least people on my team. So following through, I think, is sort of like the most essential element here, right? You can get all kinds of ideas scribbled on the whiteboard. You can get an Innovation Day project that maybe somebody works on for a full day. But there's only so big that those kinds of things can really be, unless you're willing to follow through on those things. So you can't let ideas just sort of like die on the whiteboard. That's kind of like my take on this, right? And I think a lot of ideas do come out on the whiteboard. There are certain ideas that should die on the whiteboard, but there are a lot of other ones that end up looking really good. And you have to have the space within the company to be able to follow through on this. Here's a collection of 9 different projects that actually came out of either Innovation Day or some of the other kinds of things that I talked about. They were not previously planned, right? We did not have these things built into the roadmap. What we had was flexibility within our roadmap to be able to make space to put those ideas out there. And I think that's important, not just for the ideas themselves to make sure that they go live, but to kind of show all the people who are working on these kinds of things that there absolutely is an opportunity. If you come up with something really good, then that kind of thing will be made real. And I think it's very important for everybody to be able to show that to all their employees, that these kinds of things can become real, and to showcase those. And it's a great story. One of those stories that I just wanted to talk about very briefly is kind of pulling all these things together, because you can sort of say, okay, providing food in the office is great, and making these open spaces is great, but it all sounds like kind of fluffy stuff, right? Well, it's not fluffy. It's actually very real. And here's a story that kind of pulls it all together. So one of the projects that was shown in the Innovation Day video was this use of Amazon mTurk. And there was somebody who at the company had a really good idea because of prior experience that he had using this product capability with Amazon. Had an idea for how we could basically get a bunch of data that we wanted about homes to be able to run our comparisons. And so he pitched that through Innovation Day, and Yoni ended up creating an Innovation Day project around that. And Yoni's boss, Nancy, ended up applying one of the values that we have, which is making things fun and kind of eating your own dog food. We try to use these behavioral psychology techniques to get people to engage. Well, what can we do with that internally? How can we get people to engage in this project here? And so the whole idea was she turned this thing that we needed to do into a game. And the game was, who can guess best the sizes of all these different houses? And what we were actually trying to do, so they had these Google Maps kind of pictures of those things. And what we were trying to do was to see whether, well, hey, if we as internal folks who actually understand about different kinds of homes and energy profiles and things like that, if we can do a good job of assessing the sizes of homes just by looking at them, then maybe we can actually use that with MTurk. But if we can't, then it's probably a good indication that's not a very good product idea, and maybe we shouldn't go down that path. So I only participated in this because there was a game and there was a reward, and I'm a competitive freakazoid, and that's basically it. But I did that, and I ended up winning, which was great. So I did, but the prize on this was really making space. The space that was made was, she said, we're going to give 1 day of analytics time. So if you have anything that you wanted to research, anything that you were curious about, any question you just wanted to know, you can take 1 day of one person on the analytics team, and they'll just spend the day working on your project. And so I kind of didn't really know what to do with that for a little while. And I was actually in an offsite with Dina, who is on my team, is responsible for user experience. And we were cooking some things together, I think. And as we were talking, we ended up discussing work, obviously. And she said it would be great if we actually knew the heating, the cooling, and the other kind of usage, so that we could have like a focus, a seasonal focus on heating or cooling within the home energy reports that we send. And I thought, hey, wait, that's really interesting. If we want to do that, I've got this day of analytics time. I wonder whether they would be able to find some sort of a way of separating energy use into those 3 buckets. And that actually might be really helpful. So I tried to follow through on that. I talked to Tyler, who ended up doing this, and it turns out, yes, we actually were able to analyze the data that way and be able to break those things down. We realized nobody else has been doing this, and so we were interested in filing a patent around this. And so we brought in legal to file the patent. And then, finally, we made space on the roadmap, and I worked with Itamar here, who actually carved out that space, and now we have a project that's actually out there that's actually going to break down the energy use this way, and it's going to result in a better experience for our consumers. This is a very circuitous path, right? It started with a completely different project for a completely different reason. But because of the application of all these things that we talked about in concert, that's what actually led to the result and the kind of like really good business outcome that we were looking for. So it's hard to say how these things are going to work. They're unpredictable, but that's kind of the point. So, we've gone through a number of examples that are OPower specific. What I wanted to do is kind of distill that and just sort of say, if there's a few things that you guys can walk away with, a few nuggets, what would those nuggets be? So in the same kind of categories, we've got, first of all, promote diversity. Hire a diverse group of people. Actively seek diversity of experience. Don't hire, if you're a consultancy, don't hire all the people from the company that you're working with. Hire people from elsewhere, because they're the ones who are going to bring new ideas into the projects that you're working on. Encourage office clubs and groups. It's great to have diversity, but if people just end up kind of bonding with the people that have the most similarities to them, you haven't really solved any problems. The point is to kind of find a way to get these people to come together. And I think office clubs and groups are a great way of doing that. And then working across locations. We talked about some of those things as well. The next one is establishing meaningful company values. It means create values that matter, that you can measure, that actually drive people and direct people for how they're supposed to behave and how they're supposed to work with one another. Use those values to evaluate candidates, right? Decline candidates who don't match. It's hard, especially when somebody, you're struggling to find somebody who's really, really good. You find somebody who's got all the skill sets, but they just don't match with what you're looking for. Don't hire them. It's an important kind of takeaway. And then publicize and socialize what your values are so that people know what is expected of them, and they're reminded on a regular basis. We've got these things posted on the wall so that when you walk by to go get your food, you're reminded that's the way that I'm supposed to do this stuff. And I think that actually makes people apply that on their projects. Creating a great working environment. Some of you may have the ability to influence this, others may not. But creating open spaces, remove the cube walls. This is not about privacy, it's about accessibility. And so, build offices that way, build an environment that way. If you're working in a cafe, that's fine. Get the ability to kind of work with folks. Utilize technology to make the world smaller. Some specific things that we've used that we actually really like. I got to say, this life size system that Yoni talked about is fantastic if you have multiple locations. It's like being physically present in the other person's office. It's remarkably good. You don't have to spend a huge amount of money on this, but there are some great things that you can do. And then providing some food is actually really great too, because otherwise people will leave the office to go get their snack, and they'll do it on their own schedule. And there's plenty of people who are doing that all at the same time. Why not have them go congregate in the same place, have them talk, have them mingle, see what kinds of ideas come from this. So those things all kind of fit together. Making room for informal communication. Encourage team offsites and outings. They're not wastes of time. They're wastes of time if you don't do it in such a way that it's actually conducive to business. If you go on an offsite and you all go to a movie, well, you're probably not going to be talking a whole lot during the movie about your business stuff. It might be fun, but that's all that it is. And I think there's a lot of ways of binding these two things together to have fun and at the same time, make sure that you're kind of like stirring the pot, mixing the ideas around. Holding informal celebrations and happy hours is another great way of doing that. And then investing in knowledge sharing and easy-to-use documentation. We've hired somebody, in fact, we've hired multiple people whose specific job it is to make sure, not necessarily to author all the content from scratch, but to organize the content, to edit the content, to make sure that it's actually accessible, readable, and that it's actually ultimately valuable. And then finally, following through. You've got to turn these things into action items, right? You've got to actually get things on a plan. Somebody should actually have this as part of their objectives for a quarter to make sure that they're actually advancing one of these ideas. Creating tangible deliverables to share ideas with others. These ideas will die at the whiteboard if there's not something else as a next step that needs to be created. So maybe it's just create a prototype. Maybe it's the deliverables, give me a report on the usability of this system, which forces you to go talk to and interview 5 different people. And maybe it's just paper prototypes. Maybe you draw some things scribble on some paper. You go show it to 5 people. You get the report. That's a deliverable, but it forces you to go push the idea forward. And sometimes you'll realize, hey, you know what? This thing just isn't going to work. And then you cut it off. And sometimes you'll realize, hey, this is actually a great opportunity, and I'm so glad we actually, moved forward with this thing. And then getting other people involved is a critical one as well. So those are all sort of like my rules, I guess, around how do you go about driving innovation.
So, of course, I don't have many rules, but so those are really good things that you can do, and a lot of them sound sort of straightforward, but most places don't do them. So I would recommend looking into, changing your real day-to-day to do that. But regardless of what your day-to-day is like, try and take time and just give people complete freedom and just help them and just focus on how you can help them. I think it's really important. And personally for me, I've had, there's been 6 of these innovation days now, and I've had a lot of very interesting projects that I've worked on that I could never have worked on. When I was a software engineer, I was really into neural networks and trying to use them. And a lot of our technology was not, about using them because I just had a tool I wanted to use and not an end. And I got to try that tool out. And in fact, we came up with a really cool product idea by trying that tool out. And we could compare and contrast it to other ones. Or I could do a new data visualization that nobody needs, but that I'm really curious about. And I could get a couple people from different groups at the company that I would normally not waste a whole day of their time. Someone from marketing to help me put it together, or someone that would go get some of the revenue data for our utilities business, or stuff like that I would never have gotten to do. So take time out and don't control people and just help them. That's maybe my biggest recommendation.
That's right. So there are a lot of results that I think we can get from from the things that we've talked about. Now, I just want to kind of share with you that it's not just about the direct result of coming up with some sort of new project and running forward on it. A lot of times you get these side effects that are really positive as well, and I think it creates a positive sort of like cycle within the company. And here's a great example, right? Employees love doing this kind of stuff. They're having fun doing it. They're enjoying their work. They're excited. They feel that they have an opportunity to contribute to large-scale success with the company, and it shows. And that has like really big business benefit for us. We're always hiring a huge number of engineers, right? And if you think, anytime you find a really good engineer, it's almost always the case, of course, that they have 10 freaking offers. So they have 10 different offers, but where are they going to go look to try to help decide where they're going to go work, right? Well, they're going to look at things like Glassdoor, et cetera, to see what people are actually saying about the company. And I think that's very important. It's very important for getting new talent into the door as well. In a couple of different ways. The other way is that a lot of our hiring actually comes through referrals. And it's because people are very excited about what they're doing. And in fact, a lot of the Innovation Day projects that we've been working on have been related to how can we make the hiring process more smooth or more clean. We get some great stuff that kind of comes from that as well. So the last things that I wanted to show is just sort of like the real tangible business results that we get from this. The first one is sort of the environmental impact. We are a double bottom line company. It's one of our company values. And so, with the kinds of things that we've been able to do, we've been able to save 2.4 billion pounds of CO2. That's the equivalent of saving $175 million on consumers' home energy bills. Next year, that'll be that same figure again. Right, and we have no internet, which we don't need. All right. Sorry, one sec. Okay, there we go. So $175 million saved on consumers' energy bills, and that actually translates to 1.5 billion kilowatt hours saved. Now, nobody really knows what a kilowatt hour is, so I thought I'd just kind of put that in perspective and say that's enough energy, and if we continue to grow at the rate that we are right now, then by DC Week next year, we will be saving more energy than is consumed by a city of 600,000 plus, which is the equivalent of taking our nation's capital off the grid completely. So that's the kind of business benefit that we get from these things. It's fantastic. Thank you very much.
So I know you're all hangry, but we wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. So.
Talk a little bit about staffing. So one of the complaints we get from our workers is, I don't have time. The day-to-day tasks that you gave me that have to be done fill my day. So when you hire, are you hiring ahead so that people have a certain amount of time in reserve to innovate on a day-to-day? And I'm not talking about Innovation Day, but I think innovating on a day-to-day is also part of your core company value.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, if anybody didn't hear the question, is how do you basically staff in accordance with this? If you want to make room for people, does that mean that you have to staff basically ahead of otherwise what it would need to be? And I think the answer is it's sort of like a little bit of yes and a little bit of no. I mean, there's no free lunch. You can't take room out of people's calendar to go do an offsite or to kind of like go work on some particular project without having that take away from some of the other things that are being worked on. But I'd actually argue that by taking that time away, you're actually getting more done in the long run. And I think it's all about really taking a long run approach on this, because if you take 2 days, for Innovation Day out of a year, or you do it twice and you take 4 days for Innovation Day out of a year, it's like maybe a 1% impact on the total amount of work that's getting done. But is that 1% actually yielding new kinds of projects and new kinds of ideas, so that when you're working on maybe fewer things, you're also working on better things? And that's kind of like the argument that I would make to management at any sort of company, is that it's worth sacrificing the 1% to see the 5%, the 10%, or who knows, maybe even 100% gain in what you can get done. Yeah, we got a few. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Roxy Aldrew. I recently founded a collaborative community with shared office space for social entrepreneurs, and we're the first people to provide this type of platform for social enterprise in the nation's capital. So we're going to put you guys on the spot and then ask my question. So we're first all about collaboration, because we think the more people that can get involved and come up with these, we can get better ideas and make an impact on society or in the environment. So we've reached out to a number of companies, large, small, mid-sized, because we think if we can collaborate together, we can make a difference. And often, just about every time, I get sent straight to a voicemail box, including our power. So my question is, if I give you guys my information and just show you guys what we going on, like, are you open to collaborating with these small guys that are trying to make a difference in today's society? Because I've got my business cards right here, and we're
All right.
trying to go out and make a difference here.
So, I can tell you that we do collaborate with several organizations. So we have a lot of collaboration. When it comes to like hard research, we have several collaboration projects going on. When it comes to maybe products, like you won't see as many collaborations come out. Like, we had one with Facebook, which was a big one. But I'd say, yeah, in general, we are interested. I don't know whose voicemail you got, but you can give me your info, and I definitely will look at it. But I think that collaborating, and part of the diversity thing there is that we try and bring people from different backgrounds and from these different organizations into OPower. So, a lot of the folks that we have hired have been from organizations that we may have spoken with before or collaborated with before, and that hopefully that speaks to your goals.
One thing to just kind of like answer this a little bit, broadly is how does a company go about collaborating with another company when, everybody's busy and things go to voicemail, et cetera, is I think just make it very informal. I see this, I'm a San Francisco Bay Area native myself, came over here, and I think one of the things that I've seen as a stark contrast between the two is that companies tend to be a little bit more protective over here, or it's kind of like, it's more expected to be this formal kind of communication, like, hey, I want to talk to somebody in business development about this. The best way of actually having these kinds of things is just say, hey, I would love to go get a drink. I just wanted to talk to you about, what you guys are working on, share some of the ideas that we have. Perhaps there's some sort of like synergy, some sort of overlap, and here's how you can kind of like gain from this conversation as well. And I think that a lot of people are actually very willing to entertain those kinds of things. A lot of the work that I do when I go to San Francisco to go visit our office over there is just those kinds of conversations. And I'm just having like 3 per night, every single night. It's just kind of part of the culture over there, and I think it's part of the culture that I'd like to see in the DC area as well. We probably have time for like 2 more questions. Why don't we do one here?
Can you guys talk a little bit about, as you scale the business, the challenges of keeping that kind of intimate, creative feel? I know Google struggled with this. I remember when I was in San Francisco in the mid-90s, they were much smaller, and the ability to kind of be creative was much easier, and to manage those things, to make the projects kind of more meaningful and become more real. So I'm just curious, as you guys grow, how you're looking at keeping those groups smaller, but not silo-wizing them, and things like that. And that seems to be a common challenge as companies grow.
Yeah, I think it is. I don't know if you...
Well, I mean, I guess there's a couple answers to that. One is the cultural aspect. So for anyone at the company to sort of find, their passion, it's all these, company groups. It's making sure that the offices are fairly independent and not some centralized, top down. And I know IBM has a lot of their philosophies around this, like being truly global. And we try and do that in our tiny, and growing company. But another thing is like as a software company, it's about how we design our software and applying methods, and this is getting a little bit technical, but like service-oriented architecture so that folks are decoupled, so that your team can move as fast as they possibly can if you're a 5 or 10 person product and software team, as opposed to a monolithic, kind of organization. So there's a lot that you can take from, and this is where, like Agile, Scrum comes in. But more broadly as an organization, it's these kinds of interventions that we have to make our culture seem small and to make it, accessible, and to have all these opportunities to connect with people who you might not connect with.
Can I ask actually just a question about that? So is there kind of a thought around a certain number of people per group that kind of be like the 3M model of kind of breaking up after a certain size and then splitting those into 2 groups? Is there some thought at OPower around that, or is it not that kind of designed yet?
Yeah, I think there are definitely some pros for doing that. Like, and I think I've heard this kind of thing with companies, like this magic numbers of 150 people, for example. And once you get past 150, then you should split up into like 2 business units or something like that. I would say that there's the pro of doing that is that you can still everybody knows everybody else's name, right, within their group. The bad thing is they don't know anything about anybody else outside of that. And so that means there's a lot of potential synergies. Maybe somebody's working on a technology over here and you're totally reinventing the wheel over here and you have no idea that that's the case. So I think it probably depends on what you want to optimize for. I would say that matters. But to kind of go back to like the OPower story, we had this tiny little office in the very beginning. I wasn't even there at this time. And it had I think it happened to have like a bathroom and a shower in it. And so the shower was like one of the conference rooms. And so people like,
took
having to
over
meet you in the shower.
design.
Literally in the bathtub. It was so those are like the old days. But over time it turned into a larger office building, and then it turned into a floor of an office building, and then it turned into 2 floors within the same office building, followed by now 3 locations around the world. And so I think the key is you do have to keep those connections live, right? So what we've done is that's why we made this big investment in video conference equipment. Is you walk into a room and literally you're staring at the people who are in the other room. It's like the same room. That's the kind of thing that helps to, I think, make these things smaller. The other thing is it doesn't have to be consistent. It can be dynamic. And so you might have a group of people over here and another group of people over here, but you can also switch where those people are at different times. And so maybe you're working on a project here, and then you're willing to kind of take the small hit that you need to have them have to relearn the domain somewhere else. But there's a big benefit that comes from that too. Yes, they take the hit of having to learn a new domain, but the benefit that the rest of the team gets is all the kind of information that that person brings from the last team that they were on. And so I think with Scrum development, for example, you get these Scrum teams, you try to keep those around the size of maybe like 5 to 10 folks. And if it gets too big, then yeah, we'll split it up. But then we're also willing to kind of like trade people out here and there to make sure that we're getting that right kind of like sharing of information. The last thing I'd sort of say on this is just one very simple tip, and something that we do is we actually do this thing called desk swap. It's like once a month, the last Friday of the month or whatever, and everybody just kind of throws their name out there, says, yes, I want to participate, and we hit the random button, and we say, here's the person's desk that you're supposed to go work on. And it's just amazing how much that influences things. Somebody comes into work at 8:30 in the morning, and they're looking like, oh, what are you doing here? Hey, I don't even know your name. Did you just start? Oh, what are you working on? Oh, and that's where it starts. So I think those kinds of things can work well too. And then one last question.
For one more? Yeah.
Right here.
Okay, so one of the things that you guys mentioned in a lot of your innovation examples and kind of things you use to illustrate your points are product driven. There's a lot of organizations in DC that are service driven. They're PR firms, they're professional services firms. Could you give maybe some examples of how you've seen a service driven side of the business participate in Innovation Day, whether it's something that's driven by marketing that didn't bring in the engineers? Maybe just some examples of that.
There's a lot of these. So for one, so we are a service-driven organization. Probably a third of our organization is oriented around our clients are utility companies. So we're a software as a service company, and a lot of each time that we deploy, we're not like Salesforce where we have tens of thousands of businesses. We have very few businesses, maybe 70 that we're working with. So we work very closely with them, and one of our sort of more service driven insights was looking across all of those utilities and across their different business practices. And so looking at, their, revenue to debt ratios and doing a business analysis of sort of who is our client, because, we move so fast that, like we can predict who our clients are going to be. And of course we do this kind of research anyway, but like, this specific research had not been done because that person didn't have the time and the space to do it, and this happened to be a one-person project. But I'd also like to say, I'll give you an example that's not service or technology oriented, that people did a Green the Office project where they brought plants and they put them and they found someone who would come water them once a week or however frequently, and now we have green plants around the office, and they just wanted to make the office space better. Or someone made, we have standing desks, and they're really expensive. It turns out they're like $800. So someone did a build your own standing desk project. We built like 8 standing desks for $20 each. And there's more and more of these. I mean, I would love to have shown you, like 50 or 60 projects today, and maybe that's good for a different talk. But
there are. Let me give you 2 examples that I think are sort of service and sales oriented as well that came out of this. So the sales team was really curious. We usually go in front of utility executives and we're pitching things, and we've got they have screens that are like literally the size over there. And so what they wanted to do there is they want to kind of change up the sales process. What's to make the experience of buying our software just feel radically different? What could we do? And so they got an iPad, and they thought, what if we can like do all this kind of stuff on the iPad, and we'll like build a demo that's kind of like intended to work on iPad specifically. And every time you flip it this way or you flip it that way, the thing kind of changes around. It changed the way in which we're trying to sell. It was interesting because we tried that. At first it was kind of a little, had a number of hiccups with it. And now, because it's actually a project that we put into place, we've actually decided to get all the salespeople iPads, and now they're all going to start selling that way, and we're actually changing the entire sales methodology around that. Another example on this is on the services front, which is we need to help utilities make the case. A lot of times the utilities can't buy our software without being able to show to a regulator why it's worth them spending the money on the software. And so there's a lot of different ways in which that case can be made to the regulators. And what we've done is we have the kind of tried and true method that's been working to grow the business, but we sort of said, well, what if there are other cases out there that we could make as well? So they kind of like one of the outputs was actually just a slide deck that was like, here's what this case looks like for you and for your regulators if you wanted to take this approach instead. Somebody else created an Excel model that helped them to kind of like calculate those things. So hey, we asked them this question, this question, this question, and then we can figure out for them what the key kind of like metrics are that we'd be able to drive through their through buying our product as well. So I think there's like a service kind of element to that as well. And a lot of these kinds of projects don't necessarily have to be specifically technology based. So, all right, great. Well, thank you very, very much, guys. It's lunchtime. Enjoy.
we'll stick around here if anyone wants to come up and ask any more questions.